Reverend MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle, Lady MeeLing, America. I've been known by a few names. At the end of the day, I'm still me. So, we can go into a few different things. First, in regards to my first books that I authored, the first 8 books, after having sent all of the books that I authored the first go round, I already sent them off to multiple places. First place that I technically sent them to was the Library of Congress through LegalZoom. Then, after that, I had sent the books to Amazon to be published. And then, after that, I had sent the books to various news outlets, because I kind of figured at that time that, sending it to the Library of Congress automatically meant the exact same thing as law enforcement. Apparently, I was inaccurate on that. My mistake. I'd also taken it as soon as getting the physical copies, took it to Senator Murray's office, took a copy to Temple Beth Hotfilo, Miss Catherine Caramel, and then I mailed it off. As far as the first 2 books. The Finding A and Finding B Silver Lining by me, Susan MeeLing. Then I sent it to a bunch of individuals, as well as the news, different music companies, so on and so forth. At some point in time, I received something from my biological mother. I cannot remember what it was. And it infuriated me. It did. So I sent the 8 books that I had authored by then to my biological father, Mike. All of them. Whether that was before or after the purchase of the short book and not the big book, I can't recall. Nonetheless, sent them all. Because maybe somebody could figure it out. Because I didn't know who to contact otherwise. Again, figuring that, well, if I send it to the Library of Congress, that means the Library of Congress has, Congress people in it, and Congress people know law enforcement guys, and I've already sent, a whole bunch of emails out to, ombudsman, whistleblower stuff, and that was before writing the books, so on and so forth. And then attempting to get help wherever I could for my daughter and my son and I, before winding up in Washington State and writing all the books. So I have no idea who actually purchased the short book. I have no idea. No idea. That's not something that Amazon disclosed to me on that. Just pointing that out. Then, let's see. Then there's the aspects of I had given a bunch of money to different churches and the like. That included the church my son went to. Any cash went straight there from the show that was supposed to be The Guardian Assholes. And then the Jehovah Witness Church. I have to check my mail for the one for Angel Moroni's Church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, founded by Prophet Joseph Smith. And then, so on and so forth. Sent all that out on top of the stuff that I was doing as far as my Medal of Honor art project. And all that donation charity aspect. So, for example, if let's say, whoever purchased that particular book from Amazon, I had done the donation aspect. Much more than I had sold by that point, by the way. Not forgetting the cost for all that stuff as far as my Medal of Honor project. Then I also donated to behavior and health, brain injury, something another, National Military Family Association, and Spirit of Sharing. For several months consecutively. So there's that, just as a example, and or a few. So there's a particular story in Finding the Silver Lining, which happens to discuss going up behind a guy who had told me a story about something that was what had occurred between him and a female dominant king-size candy bars. And that would be the particular individual, Alan, who had assaulted me, that I had wrote about on FetLife through my original account at the time, at the Crossroads. And the response I got was, nobody believed me. Again, not forgetting like a whole bunch of other times by then of being told, nobody believed me about a lot of stuff. And that was back in 2012. And what was claimed to have been said, which was said by someone else, was not said by me. I went to apologize to Alan, so that way we could clear up the misunderstanding, and instead, that's what I dealt with. Somebody else contacted me through FetLife asking if they could post something, and I said that was their choice of what they wanted. I couldn't prove it one way or another. It was up to them as far as that was concerned. Because if they knew that without a doubt, that was their choice. So in regards to the big book, which had not been purchased, the Finding a Silver Lining, though there are different covers for Finding a Silver Lining by me, Susan MeeLing, all the same book, because I was having issues with the technology. That set of proof of documents that I legally had the right to put into the book, apparently, as I didn't realize it looked like a report for law enforcement until 2019. Had no idea. It did not make, I did not know it looked like a law enforcement report. I don't even know for certainty if it looks like a law enforcement report. Either Finding a Silver Lining or Finding the Silver Lining or both. I don't know, because I didn't do that. Like, I didn't get that training. So I did send it to my biological father, and I would guesstimate, most likely he read, especially those two particular books. And so, if you actually read Finding a Silver Lining as well as Finding the Silver Lining, or even if you only read Finding the Silver Lining, I didn't out anybody by name, like by their full name, in Finding the Silver Lining. Finding a Silver Lining, as far and in regards to the lifestyle, BDSM, LGBTQP, swinger, all that sort of stuff, there's no actual outing of names in regard to the lifestyle. So whoever purchased Finding the Silver Lining and figured it out on their own would be who you would have to speak with, not me. Same thing in regards to, I had sent an email with the Dropbox link to several individuals. I actually posted the 2 links on Cafe Mom for that, as well as sent it to Nico at the Sanctuary. And so whoever purchased the short book instead of the short book and the big book, that would be who you'd have to speak with in that regard. And that, again, doesn't forget, like, all of the individual groups I had sent that to. Again, in not realizing that it looked like a report as far as Finding the Silver Lining. However, if in regards to, like, let's say Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., had purchased the short book instead of the big book, the names in that regard were in the big book because of other publications that were not mine. They were part of essentially reporting in that regard. As far as sending all 8 books to my biological father, if my biological sister, Patricia Ann Hom Miller, and or those individuals went and started looking at stuff because of the information in the big book that was missed out on, that would be important. So I'm gonna bring up a short book and show you real quick regards to, you can see that there are pseudonyms with the exception of the ones that I had the legal right to publish. Like, for example, I legally had the right to do so for my now dead ex-husband as the only executrix. So, you know, see, there's no actual naming or outing of people. So if there were individuals who were upset because of whoever purchased the short book, you can see that there's no actual names. So like Cookie is the name of a story, or Georgia is the name of one. And that's not giving specific names. You know, PB is another one. Again, Dakota, you know, inflatable, you know, so on and so, sex ed, you know, just giving, like, pseudonyms to the stories. Ricochet, or, you know, Remove and Bless, in that regard. So if somebody was like, hey, or Game of Double-Edged Sword, 4th of July, Harley Quinn, different particular, you can see, there's no actual names of anybody. Not until having, not low self-esteem, cars and vehicles, 9/11, CSM, bridal loop as examples. So you can see in that regard, report for duty, golf, etc. Or technological difficulties, ER dog, Archie, spiritual evolution, so on and so forth, WDW, so there's like a whole bunch of examples, so like no actual names. So whoever purchased the short book, that would be a part of the lifestyle or whatever, that was on them and their choice. And choosing not to get the big book of finding a silver lining, again, multiple covers because of my issues with technology. And so I'll just, so here's like legal documents. And my signature is on the corner because of, here's the court docket cases, and I legally had the right to, as far as that's concerned. So, while some individuals didn't want to believe what I was dealing with at the time, at least the ones that told me in person that they didn't believe me. Yeah. And since I couldn't find a lawyer that would take my case, at all, whatsoever, every time I attempted, I sent out over 100 emails per week in attempts to try to get a lawyer or an advocate or somebody to help when it came to what happened to my daughter. Especially from 2010 to 2012. So it wasn't as though I wasn't attempting to get help. I just wasn't able to have anybody contact me. Or the people who did have a return email to me who told me to contact them, then told me that they could refer me to somebody else who then either didn't contact me or told me they could refer me to someone else as far as like somebody who could actually handle it, because, I was repeatedly told, I don't know how many times, it's too big for, their britches as far as whoever I spoke with, as far as different law firms and advocacy groups. Or I was told I didn't make enough money, or I made too much money for help. And then when I reached out to, the East Coast as well as the West Coast, I was told that nobody would do the law stuff in the state of Texas because of like bar association stuff, and few believed me in regards to when I told them you don't need the same legal bar registration to do law in the state of Texas. And I was told that wasn't true and they didn't believe me. And so, no matter which way I tried, it was apparently too much. So, I just put it all together as best as I could. But in regards to finding the silver lining, I didn't out anybody by name. I didn't unmask anybody's identity. That would have been done by anybody except for me, ironically. And when I was in Washington State, I didn't use anybody's names that I knew over the years. So when I would discuss certain situations, I would say, I knew a guy, or I knew someone who did A, B, C, D, blah, 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 blah. I didn't out anybody in that regard. I didn't do that in the state of Texas. I didn't do that in Washington State. Though I was accused of it. I was accused of outing people in 2011 when I was extremely busy with all the stuff in regards to my daughter and what happened to her and my son and making sure he was taken care of. So, while yes, now in 2020 and 2019, I've had to do that aspect, I don't have people's legal names to out them. I never had access to that. I didn't do that. And since I'm not techie like others are, any blame that was put on me cannot blame me because I didn't out you. Despite me having been outed by Patrick Kennedy to my biological parents, despite Philip Olmsted, as he acknowledged, to Beatrice Renee and Jason's mom. Not me. So, and then I found out that there was a police report in Austin made against me. How did anybody have my information? The only way that anybody had my particular information was through the Austin Dominant Mentor Program, because we had to give in our identification card to prove we were old enough to be in the program. And so those in charge never gave me that envelope back. Not in Austin and not in Dallas. I was told that that would be given back to me, just like I'm sure anybody else in the dominant program, but that was not given back to me. So I didn't out anybody, not by name at those times, and only now because of how I wound up in Washington State and what occurred during my Medal of Honor art project. I think it was Miss Cenna that had taken the copies at that time and put it in an envelope. I don't know who kept the envelopes after that. So, if you were in the Austin Mentor program, whether you were in the dominant or the submissive program, did you get your envelope back? I know I didn't get mine back from the Austin Dominant Mentor program, even though I told people I was leaving. That was not given back to me. So, then again, I also didn't know who I was supposed to ask to get that back from. Though I discussed it, that I was moving before I moved. So, if this clarifies aspects, I guess it's better late than never, despite the fact I don't like lateness at all whatsoever. I'm really tired of this garbage. I really don't like being blamed for stuff I didn't do. I can't be the only person who doesn't like that. I've been dealing with it a little bit longer than some, though. Like, I've been dealing with it since I was a child, where I would be blamed for what my biological sister did, Patricia Ann Hom Miller. And then, in Illinois, the same thing as New Jersey. And then, after fighting to join the United States of America's Armed Forces, the Army branch, to be emancipated, my biological sister, Patricia Ann Hom Miller, had to accept responsibility for everything she did wrong. And then they moved to the state of Texas. And then as soon as Mike and Anna got to the state of Texas, after Patricia had been in the state, that same pattern of behavior occurred, where I was blamed for stuff I didn't do. So since I was blamed for stuff I didn't do, not only then, but then afterwards in various locations, various communities. If somebody could contact me to let me know how to clear my name, because obviously it wasn't until 2018 that I was speaking with Criminal Investigation Division of Joint Base Lewis McCord and the Tacoma Police, who told me to contact the FBI, and CID told me to contact the Pentagon. It wasn't until then that I started naming names, as best as I could remember, which usually had been their pseudonames, but not the ones in the book. So Alan was the one in regards to the king-size candy bar. And again, in 2010, I had already contacted Ombudsman, the whistleblowing, in regards to what occurred to my daughter. So, just saying, now I've sent handwritten letters, copies of, so on and so forth, to a bunch of locations, as well as my books, and more full, especially those two. And so, while I guesstimate some people continued to blame me, even though what occurred, and I wound up in Washington State. Again, I have this thing about respect. And so, in Washington State, even there, I didn't out anybody by name. Nobody in Washington State knew who I knew in the state of Texas. I just said I knew someone, or I knew a guy. And didn't really discuss that stuff. So, now after having recently contacting all of those individual branches and divisions and stuff, as well as the House of Congress and the House of Senate and the White House and the Pentagon, all the branches and the FBI and the CIA and NOAA and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, at what point in time do I get contacted for, hey, let me know, specifically who to get this to, so that way stuff actually gets done. So that way, I don't have to deal with this anymore. Because I'm really tired of it. Could have just been asked. Specifically asked. Instead of a roundabout way. Lying, essentially, to my face. And stalking during my Medal of Honor art project trips. I did discuss how I had been threatened online, in person to people. I don't do well with hints if that hasn't been figured out. So literally flat out telling me who I should contact instead of wasting time. Because enough time has already been wasted. Realistically. Time I could have had with my 2 children. Despite everything that I did to make sure that I didn't waste time, the time that I did not have with them because of, all the other garbage that went on. I can't get that back. I'm not going to calm down about that either. Not without justice occurring. And I've already contacted the Justice Department. Recently. So, if somebody else went to Congress or Senate or whatever, for example, the guy, John, at Club Sapphire in Seattle, Washington, telling me he knew a female who had gone to somebody to get laws changed about certain things on outing. If that had to do with, I don't know who. Whether it was me or somebody else. I did contact the IRS. That's not outing. And again, how many times I was having issues with technology. Even stuff. And I did not do the updates on my laptops back then. You can thank Anna Louise Lally Hom for that. And Patricia Ann Hom Miller. Not me. kinda tired of being silenced when I did nothing wrong. Not forgetting that identity theft that I filed the San Antonio police report in May of 2013 when I found it because of, being told by a apartment complex in Florida. Anybody know anybody who did business in Florida? I mean, I did speak with some people that I had considered to be as family about Florida and moving there until that issue with Cowboys Dance Hall, which was after I had already signed the paperwork and just before having to testify in court. I hate cherubim. Truly do. Truly do. So, somebody could actually let me know instead of hints, because that will, elevate my anger. Hints do. I don't do well with hints, and especially now, after all that sort of stuff, definitely not a good idea to do hinting. It's much better to just be upfront and to the point. So much better. I don't do well with games. Any type of game. Because my life is not a game, despite what apparently you, whatever you are, seem to think. I don't take kindly to it at all. But hey, what could go wrong infuriating me? What could go wrong causing my anger to turn to rage and fury? What's the worst thing that could happen? If you want to play that game, right? Then instead of just being truthful and honest, I guess that's a game, although I don't recommend that game at all. Highly do not recommend that. But if you want to play, and now that I know, what's the worst thing that could happen if my temper flares, right? I mean, hypothetically, you could take into consideration what happened during the month of April 2010 when I continuously asked Tammy Hatcher if I could go on my daughter's field trip. Did anything happen in weather stuff? Maybe there is an example there that could be used in regards to it's better if I'm in a good mood instead of worrying or anger. Another example, hypothetically, in regards to a whole bunch of individuals I thought were lawyers in both the California area as well as in New Jersey and New York in 2012. Did anything occur? I don't know. Anything happen during the time of 2011? That was like a little, how'd that happen? In weather or anything? Hypothetically, out of the blue, pun intended. Just throwing that out there. Not forgetting that, whatever you want to call it, apparently in this era they're called UFOs. In Irving, that wasn't a military aircraft. I knew that then. Afterwards. What's the worst thing that could happen continuing to deny justice to me? What's the worst thing that could happen? Especially after working on my Medal of Honor art project. What's the worst thing? Do you really want to find out? I prefer not. I prefer to be in a good mood. I do. And I'm really, really tired of, making myself have to be in a good mood. I've walked on eggshells for a very long time. Since I was a child. If that is a preference for others. Because of games that would prefer to be played instead of just being honest. Instead of just, doing the right thing. Instead of just being blunt and to the point. Because, hints don't do well for me. Yeah. Because my mind goes the way it does. My thoughts and emotions and stuff. And since it's known, hypothetically, what occurred weather-wise the day of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. What happened while I was in the coma? Any issues? I have made the joke of Mother Earth and that whole thing. So, I really prefer to be in a better mood instead. And for how many years has one particular aspect not been taken care of properly at all? That is probably a really bad thing as far as that. That's probably a little bit of a danger in that regard. But since I'm not married, I guess I can't say if wifey's happy, lifey's happy, and if wifey's not happy, lifey's not happy. So, I guess it's just hell hath no fury like a mother scorn. Right? So, you amongst yourselves outed yourselves. Not me. So, you can blame yourself.